everybody. This is Rosa from Latinx-lens, co-founder, co-host of the podcast. I am a Rotten Tomatoes approved film critic, and you are listening to Victims and Villains.
Welcome to the show where we talk nerd, we talk hope,
and speak nothing else. I'm your co-host, Mark Pettit.
And I'm your other co-host, Captain Nostalgia, and this is episode 333, The Curse of Audrey-Earnshaw. And welcome. This is Mark's first time on hosting the show, and this is also Rosa's first time as a guest. And Rosa, I think this is actually the first time we've actually ever had a Rotten Tomatoes approved critic on our show.
Oh my. Now I have to live up to that. The pressure.
Yeah. It just keeps building for you.
Right? Oh wow. No, thank you guys for inviting me. It's good to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm not trying to make you feel pressure, just like trying to give you the honor of being the first.
Thank you. I truly do feel honored to be here. So thank you.
No problem. I love the idea and the concept and the story about where Latinx-lens as a podcast began. And in preparation for this episode, I was really kind of going through your guys' just body of episodes. And I'm curious if you can kind of give our listeners a elevator pitch on kind of how you guys got started and what the show's about.
Yeah, of course. So at the moment, I am currently working towards earning my degree in film and media studies. And I was taking a course, Race and Gender in American Film, where we were supposed to, of course, learn about the diverse group of people and contributions and their representation in the film and film history. So for week 4, we were going to learn about Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans, as well as Asian Americans, just for 1 week. And in our 500-page textbook that we're required to use for the class, I was very much disappointed to just read a page and a half of just Hispanics and Latinos and what we've done and contributed to the film industry and television. So from there, the idea came to me of perhaps trying to do something about it, and that's when latinx-lens came to my head, and I posted a tweet first just to make sure we were gonna have at least one person out there who would be interested in the content and to know more about what we've done and how we're also represented, as well as our thoughts and reviews on film through our lens. To my surprise, there was a lot of positive and support feedback to the tweet, and my co-host ended up replying and commenting, and now we're here. It's been a joy, and at the same time, it's also a bit surreal to think that we've been doing this for just a few months, and we haven't been doing it for long. But that the reaction and the support has been very welcoming, and yeah, it's been thrilling. It's been joyous as well.
So your co-host Catherine and you have never been in the same room. Is that what I'm understanding? Like, how was the planning process in the beginning? Kind of like taking this idea that you had and working with someone that you'd kind of, just casually met over social media?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I've never met Catherine personally. She's in Texas. I'm in California. So it was just a matter of trying to work things out and trying to see what both of us were trying to what we wanted the podcast to be. So it's taken a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of Skype calls, a lot of just communication, texting, and everything. And of course, like the first few episodes, you can notice that we're still trying to find our groove, and we're trying to get acquaintance with each other. But ultimately, I think halfway through the episodes, we've been able to get the hang of it. And I've been very lucky to have Catherine as my co-host and co-founder, and all her support, her knowledge, her perspective, and her everything she brings to the podcast is very much valuable. And man, I couldn't be luckier. Because not only do I have a co-host and a co-founder, but we've actually become really, really close friends. So, and I think it's starting to show in the podcast as well. So, yeah, it's been weird, especially during this our times right now where everything is just virtually done. But ultimately, I think it's working out.
That's awesome. Like, I absolutely, if I can just speak on a personal level, absolutely love the podcast that y'all do. I've only listened to 2 episodes so far, but just especially the first episode, I really liked how y'all introduced the podcast and kind of like set the tone, and you carry that through in the second episode with about Edward James Olmos. And I just really like your perspective on how you acknowledge that there's like an importance of like coming from a background, your racial background, your ethnic background, and that affecting how you're like you view the world and how you view media. But then also like you don't have to be part of that specific background to actually enjoy or partake in certain media. And I think that one cool thing I think you said in the first episode was that like you don't have to be in a particular place of like that experience, but you have to treat things with respect. And I really like your take on that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it's come to, of course, we all know that, especially us who are watching movies and quite often, we know that the power and the influence that film has, and their influence in shaping and molding our perspective on society. So I thought I do think it is important to talk about these films from our perspective, how we feel that these movies are either representing us, as well as in the same token, how society is looking upon us. And I also do believe that film has been relatively, in a broader sense, I think movies and Hollywood particularly, they've been very peculiar and to pinpoint and just selective on what stories and what cities and what demographics to be representing. Because ultimately the Latinx or the Hispanic, however people decide to identify themselves as, it's a broad, diverse, rich group of people. We're not just Mexicans. We're not just in East LA, in Los Angeles. There's a huge population all over across the United States. And again, it's not just Mexican. You have countries in Central and South America as well, and the Caribbean, of course. So just to talk about that, and also even though we are minorities and in regards to film representation, we do acknowledge that majority of the representation is from our demographic. So we also acknowledge our privilege in some sort, especially me, because I'm your stereotypical Chicana. I'm from East LA. So I acknowledge that whatever little representation we've had, it's been me. So yeah, I just find it important to acknowledge all of that, and to also just shine a light and just bring awareness to people out there that our community, it's not just what you watch on TV and what you watch in film. We are far more than that.
I think for me, I've enjoyed most about seeing and understanding different cultural perspectives. I think this year for 2020, for my own personal journey, has been like wanting to understand things from a different cultural perspective. That, you know, there are other vantage points out there than just a married white guy. And I think at the same time, like a lot of the stuff that we were seeing kind of at the beginning of the summer with a lot of the Black Lives Matter and the civil unrest, it was challenging me to really kind of dig deeper into understand the history of that unrest. And then when Rose and I began kind of talking about and entertaining the idea of her coming and doing an episode on here, it actually started with Selena. I thought it was kind of funny that, you know, digging into your catalog, one of the very first episodes you guys did was on Edward James Olmos, who plays the father in the 97 biopic, and doing an episode on her with someone of Hispanic and Latino descent, and kind of understanding that culture a little bit more, and finding out and educating myself on the Tejano perspective, and then getting to kind of, as Mark said, dig into how the Latinx podcast started and like why there's a need for it. I think is also a fascinating depiction and realization that not a whole lot of people have, that there is an actual need for a podcast like the Latinx-lens.
Yeah. I wasn't even even as I'm sitting down right now recording this, I can probably only think of 2, 3 maybe other Latinx or Hispanic podcasts that discuss film. There isn't a lot of our perspective and our thoughts and our point of views out there, but the overwhelming support and reception of the first episode really took Catherine and I by surprise. I ultimately said that we estimated our underrepresentation, and it was a shock. It was a shock to realize that there's not that many shows out there, many podcasts with Latinos discussing film, and it's still mind-boggling as I sit here talking about it.
Well, so there's a portion of your guys' show where you guys will actually recommend a movie to your listeners, and I kind of want to steal a page out of that book and wonder if you can recommend our listeners a movie that kind of adequately displays the Latino or Mexican experience like your podcast talks about.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, so the Latinx Lens recommends the little segment. I think we just introduced it as a form for us too, because as we're doing the podcast, we're also learning. We're learning. We're broadening our spectrum and our perspective and everything. Film history. So for the most part, majority of our films that we recommend are older films from the 50s and the 40s and even the 60s. And in a way, we're trying to discuss how we've been represented from decades from back in the 50s and the 60s. So I think the film that I highly recommend a lot of people to watch, that isn't nearly as acknowledged and given the respect and the respect it needs, it's Salt of the Earth from 1954. It is perhaps the first film in film history to represent the Mexican American community. It takes place in New Mexico, which is, of course, another state that isn't rarely represented in film in general. And it looks at Mexican Americans, zinc miners. But what I very much enjoyed about this film is the feminist narrative it carries. And for our community, for the Latinx community, our culture that tends to be very machista, very misogynistic, it was